Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for joining. Well, if you celebrated, I hope you have a Merry Christmas. We've got a great show. We're going to take up some important subjects with a couple of the state's leading Capitol reporters. But first, Pennsylvania is now more divided, and the divisions are widening. We've got those subjects and more after these words.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
All right, well, sitting across from me is Jeff Coleman. He's the principal and founder of Churchill Strategies. We're going to talk about a number of important subjects. I'll tell you what, the one thing, if we didn't know before, Pennsylvania is a deeply divided state, and elections are only illustrating that. And not only are we a divided state, but the cultural and political divide seems to be growing, seems to be widening. Am I right or wrong?
You're right, because what you have really is everyone listening to a different station. You know, you have your cable news, you have your church of flavor, you have the way that you express yourself culturally. We live in a little borough of Lemoyne, and that was a town where you could really get along with your neighbors and hang out, picnics, summer.
You're not going where I think you're going with this, are you?
But it's very divided. I mean, it's a community that you feel it on election day, when you're walking to the polls and people really can't carry on a conversation when you're going in line because you can't ask the big question that'll destroy the relationship. Who are you voting for?
Yeah,
and you think, well, at borough council, at voting for a mayor, is it that divided? And it really is. And
is it getting worse?
It's getting worse because we're not doing anything to fix it. I mean, none of us are actively making steps to say to hang out if you're a Republican with a Democrat. You're not calling a Republican up and saying, can we have coffee? Yeah. Can we talk about anything else but what divides us? And going into this new year, all of us are going to have.
I'll tell you what, for all the years when I was in the classroom teaching college students, you know what I told them? If you watch Fox News, then also tune in to MSNBC and CNN. If you read the New York Times, read at least the editorial pages of the Wall Street Journal. I told them, you have a responsibility to understand both sides of all these important issues.
Yeah. What you have now is people saying, even if you're running, say, for Prothonotary and Clerk of Courts or County Commissioner, saying, look, I used to split my ticket. I'm a Democrat, but I used to split my ticket. I'm a Republican, I used to split my ticket. You have very few people admitting that they would ever vote for someone in the other party. Yeah. That's a big deal.
Yep. All right, turning to another subject, I'll tell you something. We have a new U.S. Senator who used to wear, he doesn't do it so much anymore, baggy shorts and hoodies.
Yeah.
And he goes into, and he has had 2 strokes before he took office, and then after he takes the oath of office to the United States Senator to become our United States Senator, along obviously with Senator Casey, Robert Casey, he has to go into the hospital because he's in a state of depression.
Yeah.
And yet his personality seems to dominate much now of who he is and what he does and what he says.
Yeah, there's this an authenticity that people love about John Fetterman. Other people call it something else. As well, he's being an entertainer. This is a clown show. But then you've watched him over the past few months navigate some pretty difficult issues like Israel. Right. I mean, if you see those clips that went viral of him waving an Israeli flag outside of the Senate office building, well, people
given the anti-Semitism that's arisen in the wake of the war between Israel and Hamas.
You have both sides on the Israel-Palestinian divide kind of marching to one drummer. And then here's John Fetterman stepping out doing something different. He's doing it on the border. He's doing it on all kinds. I don't know what the main strategy is, but I think it is somewhat refreshing to see someone do something other than the expected party line.
he has rejected the progressive label, you think?
No, I mean, he's not calling himself a progressive, but he's also assuming almost old Casey Democrat positions. Not on everything. He's very clearly, pro-choice, which the Casey family traditionally had not been.
Right.
But on some issues, he's carving out this blue-collar, working-class lane that in many cases is occupied by Trump.
Yeah. And remember, it's not like he's a long-time senator, serving senator.
Right.
He's in, ended the first year of
right.
a 6-year term. So we'll have to see what happens.
Completely redefining the office and the expectations. And I think that's okay.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, the legislature has lost its luster, according to our guest. We'll get into that and more back after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right, Jeff Coleman, I mean, one of the questions that gets raised because of the difficulties the state legislature has, its luster, its significance, what change do you think has occurred over the last couple of years that matter to the voters of the state?
I think the kinds of people who run for political office today are different. One of my friends in the House got a text message the other day that the other party was recruiting by text message. I mean, literally putting a text message to the entire district and saying, here are the salaries, here are the benefits. If you want to sign up, it's a great gig.
Instead of going like they used to some political operative whose turn it was to move up from a local office to the state legislature,
look,
right?
You raise a good point, because it's a good thing that it's just not the bosses picking. But the motivation for people to come in right now, many people are playing in Washington and Harrisburg to TikTok. They're looking for a viral moment. They're looking to make a point, cash in, maybe lobby. And the kinds of people that we had when I was elected in 2000, it was the last of the World War II generation, some Vietnam vets, some Korean War vets. Arguably, they took the job a little more seriously.
Yeah.
And so when you see that knife divide right between the aisle, knowing that most Republicans and Democrats are not eating together, but they're not talking.
No, you're onto a significant point, and I've noticed this as a longtime observer of the legislature, that these people used to be friends. They would scream and shout at each other in the halls of the General Assembly.
Drink.
But then go out with their families.
That's right.
And socialize and interact together.
Yeah.
A lot of that is now missing.
That's right. Because the assumptions we're making about people in the other party are, if you're a Democrat, you're probably a communist. If you're a Republican, you're probably a red-headed MAGA fascist, right?
Yeah.
And when you start out with that, there's nowhere to go.
I know. It is remarkable how difficult compromise is to reach on the major issues that confront the state.
Even minor ones. I mean, every minor issue now is becoming a piece. So you look back in Washington, you look back in Harrisburg, and say, what have we done? And they're frozen right now. Maybe it's because of a water leak. Maybe it's not.
Yeah. And maybe it's because of the electorate, which is definitely polarized in ways that it didn't used to be. We've always had, in a sense, a polarized electorate, but now moving people, getting people to change their views on positions is very difficult, because they don't listen to, they don't watch, they don't observe the other side.
That's right.
And therefore it's difficult to weigh opinions when you're only hearing one side.
That's
and
right.
having that side reinforced daily.
That's right. When people are almost conditioned now to hear a buzzword. So if you were to say, pick an issue, Israel, Palestine, Israel, Hamas, if you say the wrong thing in the first sentence, the assumption is you're on one side or the other. That conversation shuts down. And you imagine multiplying that now on every issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever?
They're in a tough spot.
Are there some lawmakers that are trying to move beyond that divide?
Yeah, there's some people who, and it's just old-fashioned, people who invite people over to their homes on the weekend. Hey, our wives should get together, our husbands should get together.
Play some golf and tennis together.
Yeah, sure. And I don't want it to be a good old boys club, but there has to be some level of collegiality that helps people, some environment where they say, let's breathe some air. Yeah. This is.
It also makes a huge difference in dealing with the governor, regardless whether that governor is a Democrat or a Republican.
100%. Yeah. And we're in a spot right now where nobody can really do the big play because of the way that the legislature is divided, for sure.
Yeah. Well, look, as always, you're welcome on the program. Come back with some of your observations. All right, coming up, you thought that we got into the big stories of the week. We got more coming.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
We're going to deal with a number of important topics. How about Trump and Colorado, U.S. Steel, Representative Scott Perry, and of course, the conclusion to the state budget. Joining me to do that is Tom Lehman. He's the Capitol reporter with WGAL News 8, and Charlie Thompson. He's the Capitol reporter, among other things, with the Harrisburg Patriot News PennLive. All right, Charlie, I'll tell you, Trump in Colorado, you almost don't know where to start with it, but it was huge news. It's not finished yet.
Right.
Obviously, we have to wait to see if the Supreme Court weighs in when go ahead.
So the reference there is to Colorado Supreme Court decision that, if left stand, could bounce Donald Trump or prevent Donald Trump from being on the ballot in the presidential race next year.
Right.
Under a finding that he would be disqualified by a constitutional provision that dates to the Civil War that prevents someone who was active in an insurrection against the nation from holding a high elective office.
Now, go ahead.
This case will likely be going to the U.S. Supreme Court, and who knows? I'm not going to predict the outcome there, but what was of interest to me was just could it happen here in Pennsylvania?
That's a good question.
I think that. We don't really know for sure, but I just would like to remind your voters that your readers, your readers, Terry, that your viewers is the word I was looking for. Just like to remind your viewers that it was tried here. A similar thing was tried in 22. A man named John Hill from Muncie went to federal court, tried to get Doug Mastriano and Scott Perry off the ballot in 2022. Arguing that their participation or affiliation with Trump in and around the January 6, 2021 attacks on the Capitol put them in this category of being an insurrectionist, and therefore they should not be allowed to be on the ballot. And that went nowhere here in Pennsylvania. Well, the problem
is we're dealing with the U.S. Constitution, the 14th Amendment, Section 3, and when it comes to if you engaged in an insurrection, these officers, could not hold an office, a government office. doesn't include the President of the United States. That's the problem.
Right, and what's
when it lists the offices, Vice President, electors, representative, go ahead.
Well, I think it also, that exact point raises the question, what is another court going to say? Because as we know, the Colorado State Supreme Court is not the highest court in the land.
Right,
and
exactly.
this goes all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, which I think a lot of people are already beginning to think somehow that's going to end up being the end-all be-all here. That's something you have to think about. What are they going to say? Because ultimately, they're going to have the last say. So at the end of the day, is Colorado's state Supreme Court making this ruling something that's going to affect everybody everywhere? Probably not.
Yeah.
But there's a lot still to be shaken out on that.
Yeah, well, Charlie, there's no guarantee the U.S. Supreme Court will even take it up. I mean, they're likely to, but there's no certainty to that, is there?
No, but I think that the Trump campaign wants them to take it up because they want to get this whole thing quashed.
All right, Tom, we're going to turn to another subject. In the news lately is U.S. Representative Scott Perry from the 10th Congressional District, which is over in Dauphin County and parts of Cumberland,
York County.
And York. Go ahead.
Yeah, Scott Perry, who represents sort of the capital region, has been fighting with federal prosecutors to try and keep a lot of his text messages, emails, and some other communications obscured from prosecutors because they have been investigating a lot of the efforts to try and overturn the 2020 election. And
yes.
Scott Perry, as we found through a lot of the other investigations that have been taking place, had a lot of dealings, had a lot of communications with these people. He hasn't been charged with anything, just to be really clear.
Right.
Has not been charged with anything at this point, but he's been involved in sort of this
anti-Trump act. Go ahead.
Well, he was dealing with a lot of the
pro-Trump.
He was dealing with a lot of the principles involved in here. Too many to really name, and I won't get too far into the details. But he was communicating with a lot of people. I think you could say that he was even sort of coordinating in the sense like he was helping introduce people to other people. There were a lot of things going on. But the big thing is that he's been trying to keep these messages from prosecutors, and now a court has ruled that he can.
All right, we're going to run to a break. I'm going to give Charlie a chance to weigh in on this. We'll see what happens to Scott Perry, if anything, after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine.
This year.
Yeah. All right, Charlie Thompson, Scott Perry, he's going to face some Democratic challengers, isn't he?
Yeah, as to Perry, one of the things that another reason that all eyes are on Scott Perry is that his district has been rated sort of like the first target in Pennsylvania for Democrats to flip now if they feel like they need a seat in Pennsylvania as they work on trying to retake the U.S. House. Republicans, of course, will be very interested in holding this one, but there's a lot of Democrats already gunning for Perry, including people who are from outside the district right now and are parachuting in, like a retired Marine Corps aviator,
now,
Michael
you do
O'Brien.
not have to live in the district when you run for Congress. You're just in the state.
Right. So, that's going to be a very shaping up as a very hot, heavy congressional race.
Big furor this week. U.S. Steel. Who should buy? Should a Japanese company buy U.S. Steel? I think that's been a dominant issue.
Yes. Landed like a gut punch to a lot of us in Pennsylvania this week when we heard the news that the boards of Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel had ratified the terms of a sale of roughly $15 billion for Japan-based Nippon Steel to buy and operate what is Pittsburgh-based U.S. Steel, and that's an iconic, that's an iconic Pennsylvania-based manufacturer. I mean, Pittsburgh's identity is based on it. I mean, the whole
now look,
Pittsburgh
we are
Steelers logo is
we
sort
are
of
an industrial state. Coal, iron, steel, and now natural gas are huge issues in the Pennsylvania economy.
Right. Sure. But this steel acquisition has engendered a lot of heated reaction. We've seen Senator Fetterman and Casey and Congressman DeLuzio out there appeal to the Biden administration to do whatever it can to pause it. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of that is, we may find that a lot of that is based on just sentimentality and tradition. If you just, if we look at free market capitalism, I mean, this is the way that a lot of us have traditionally said we want our economy to work. There are people out there who have looked at this deal more dispassionately, who have said, look, it's not like some kind of a catch and kill operation. Nippon Steel has bought U.S. Steel because they want to try to expand their market in the United States. They want to be a successful, thriving steel company in America, and this gives them the platform to do that. If that works out well, they say they're going to honor collective bargaining agreements and so forth. It may turn out in the end to be a decent thing for the workers.
Take it up.
I think to Charlie's point, you talk about your traditional Pennsylvania companies, what we've been known for here in Pennsylvania for so many years, no matter which region you're in. I just think that a lot of people are looking at this as if it's sort of like we're handing the keys to the car to somebody else, and we're not going to be able to feel like we're quite as in control or in ownership of something that we've had for so long.
But it's also kind of in a different. You have to look at it through a different lens than like I know that people have had concerns about China's level of investment in like farmland in America and that sort of thing, but it has been pointed out that Japan is one of our tightest allies, and
That's true. That's a good point.
There's very little sense that this is going to be some kind of a danger to us from a national security standpoint.
But boy, I'll tell you, it got a lot of airtime, particularly on but all newspapers. And
it does. I totally understand the hurt that people feel. I mean, in just losing, a Pennsylvania-based corporation in that sense.
An iconic Pennsylvania corporation.
But it may have a new lease on life that a generation from now, people may look back on this and say, that wasn't a bad thing at all.
All right, we may be down to the end of the calendar year. We were supposed to be done with the Pennsylvania budget, June 30?
Yeah.
And we finally get it done.
I think we're about a week-ish out from when all this got wrapped up. Lawmakers, the governor, they took care of all their business at the Capitol. I think everybody's hoping that next year it won't take so long to get a fiscal code, school bills, and pretty much everything else.
So everybody gets the money they were legislatively supposed to get.
Aside from Penn Vet, yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to thank both of you for the important update. We'll have you back soon and get into a bunch of other important topics. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and have a great Christmas.